often it takes death to appreciate a life well lived. On January the 10th of this year, David Bowie died. And he released his last album 2 days before he died, called Black Star. Well, do you know what happened on January the 11th? The #1 album on the iTunes chart was David Bowie's album. In fact, the day after he died, on the iTunes list of the top albums, the top 10 albums, 5 of them were his. In the top 20, 11 of them were his. Now, I'm one of them who kind of jumped on the bandwagon. All this attention to David Bowie, I wanted to hear more about his music and actually listen to it. Well, one of the songs I really enjoyed listening to was "It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City." It was actually written by Bruce Springsteen in 1973, which was featured on his first album. But David Bowie thought it was such a good enough song that he wanted to record it himself. And so the song is about a guy who says that my skin was like leather, and also that he was he had diamond looks like a cobra. That he would, even though he was born blue and weathered, that he came on the scene like a supernova. And he walked like Marlon Brando up to the sun and could dance like a Casanova. So a very, very proud individual. But then life in the city grinds to him. In fact, he meets the devil, and the devil kind of seduces him. And then later on, he actually goes in the subway and almost describes being in hell in his time in the subway. So it's hard to be a saint in the city. But for us, the resurrection inspires us to be saints in the city. Now, wouldn't it be nice to have lived in the time of Jesus, as we heard in today's gospel, to announce the good news? You know what? It's hard to be a saint in the city today, and it's hard to be a saint even 2,000 years ago. Now, Jerusalem at about the year 33 AD had a population between 20,000 and 40,000. So that means similar to Chestermere, at least on a lower scale. However, when it came to the major feasts like Passover, Pentecost, and Booths, the population would increase tenfold. So 200,000 people in Jerusalem. So it was a major city at that time. And so the women, because they loved the Lord and were transformed by his teaching, wanted to do the honorable thing, to go and anoint his body. And so when they go, there's no body. These two men say, hey, remember the words of Jesus. Oh yeah, he said he's going to die and rise again. So they go and tell the good news to the apostles, to the 11. What's their response? An idle tale. Some translations have it, nonsense. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. But only Peter decided, I'm going to go check this out myself. He goes to the empty tomb and is amazed. The empty tomb, and he's amazed by the encounter. And even the way Jesus appears to some of the others in Luke's gospel. So had we continued reading this passage, we would have encountered the two on the road to Emmaus, who are bewildered by what's happened, and Jesus is among them, teaching them. And then when they break bread together, they realize it is the Lord. And even before he's ascended, he teaches his disciples. Now another appearance is next week. We'll hear about doubting Thomas. And so Jesus says, touch my wounds. And so it depends on the need of the individual. Jesus appears to them and encourages them to say, hey, the resurrection should inspire you to tell the good news, to be saints in the world. So the resurrection inspires us to be saints in the city. Now St. Paul has a wonderful definition of what a saint is, how transformed by the resurrection one becomes. In Galatians 2:19-20, he says that I no longer live, but Christ was crucified for me. The life I live is not my own. That in fact, even though I live this life in the flesh, I live by faith, by the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me. So one is so transformed, one wants to share that good news with others. And even Acts of the Apostles shares 3 times about Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. Here, the great persecutor of the faith, after his conversion, they encountered the resurrected Lord. He's now the greatest proponent of the good news. And so he's the one who goes into the cities and is the saint that tells the people the good news. Now, it's hard to be a saint in the city. Hey, Bruce Springsteen wrote it and sang it. David Bowie also sang it. But isn't it the same for us too? That when we share the good news with others about Jesus or about our faith, it's kind of like similarly as the 11 encountered the words from the women. This is nonsense. This is an idle tale. So it's hard to be a saint in the city. And I think that's why Pope Francis called for this year of mercy, in which each Christian is renewed by the encounter of God's mercy, particularly through the power of the resurrection, to be renewed and make fruitful mercy in their lives, and in turn to give consolation to people in the world, to be saints in the city. Now, Pope Francis also called this year because it's the 50th anniversary of the conclusion of Vatican II. And Vatican II was the council in which it brought the unchanging content of the Christian faith into the changing context of the modern world. And so the whole church has been kind of renewed in the way that the church worships, the way the church communicates socially, the way the church sees herself, the way the church dialogues with other Christians and other non-Christians, and how the church ultimately proclaims the good news of Jesus. It does speak about a document called Lumen Gentium, the light of the nations. And it speaks about who the saints are who have to be in the world. And it's hard to be a saint in the city. And so the document Lumen Gentium speaks about the laity, so those who are non-cleric, so all of you here. And it says that your task is to bring the church to not only make it present, but make it operative in the place in the world where Jesus is not present, where the church is not present. And to give it salt, is to give it light and salt, so something tangible, to renew it and bring the good news there. Hey, that's not easy, hey, to leave the safe confines of the church. It's easy to be a saint in church, but it's hard to be a saint in the city. And so how do we bring this good news to our city, our cities, or our world? I think if we look to the Easter lilies here, I think they speak about three virtues that I think that are very important about those who are the saints in the city. One is that the Easter lily, because it's a bulb, as soon as it gets a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of warmth in the soil, it's one of the first plants to pop out. And so it's an indication of spring. Hey, the long, cold, lonely winter is gone. There is new life here. And I think those who are the saints in the city, those transformed and inspired by the resurrection, by their mere presence in the world, give it life. So when you are working, whether it's in commerce, in business, in construction, in mining, in teaching, wherever, just by your mere presence gives life to the world. So the Easter lilies remind us, hey, those who are the saints in the city give life. Second of all, you notice that the Easter lily is shaped as a trumpet, and so throughout the scriptures, the trumpet always heralds good news. For instance, when Joshua was leading the people to the promised land, just before it got to Canaan, in Jericho, they blew the trumpets and the walls came down. And also when Jesus comes again, the angels will trumpet their horns. So the trumpet is a symbol of proclaiming good news. And so that's our task if we're the saints in the city. Hey, is to proclaim good news. And so the Easter lilies remind us of that. Also, I think for many of you coming in here will realize, boy, it smells so fragrant here. And probably even past the walls here, you could smell the Easter lilies. And even though they're so far away, they still give that fragrance. And I think the saints in the city, inspired by the resurrection, kind of bring joy, like a fragrance. And even though one is far away, yet that beauty and that joy kind of permeate and go into the world. So they're kind of being like salt of the earth and light of the world. So it's hard to be a saint in the city. But if we look to the Easter lilies, it reminds us, hey, to announce good news, to just by mere presence give life, And also that our encounter with the Lord, who so transforms us, should give a fragrance and a beauty to the whole world. So the resurrection inspires us to be the saints in the city. And you know what? It's not easy. Hey, life is a grind. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus says, if you want to be my disciples, you must take up your cross daily and follow me. And that's why every Sunday we come together as a Christian people, because we are reminded of our dignity as saints. Hey, when the cross in life gets down, or we're kind of befuddled by our faith, or people think our faith is nonsense, well, we come back here to be renewed in the Eucharist, which is the memorial of Christ's passion and his death. We're inspired by his word and also the presence of the saints here. So when we're dismissed from the celebration, go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. Well, even the word Mass comes from Latin, ita missa est. Missa, which means mission. So the Mass is about mission. We've encountered the goodness of the resurrection, inspired by it, and we got to go and share that good news to be the saints in the world, as difficult as it is. So often it takes the death of someone to appreciate a life well lived. David Bowie, all the popular albums now, because people realize, boy, this was a very, very good musician. And so as I mentioned about one of my songs I've appreciated of his, it's hard to be a saint in the city. Well, likewise, with the death of Jesus, it helps us remember, hey, that was a life well lived. But it's only the beginning. And now he has died and has risen again. And so his resurrection should inspire us to be saints, to remind us of our dignity, and in turn to bring the good news, to announce it as Peter was transformed, Paul was transformed, the women who encountered the empty tomb were transformed, and even all the apostles and saints for 2,000 years have been transformed by the encounter of the resurrection. So this week, let us bring this good news that Jesus has indeed risen, that the resurrection should inspire us to be the saints in the city.